Tonight, a short-lived return to the gridiron.
I feel like I'm kind of the outsider.
Coach Joe Kennedy resigns his position after a long-fought legal battle over public prayer. Plus, the race for the White House.
Our enemies are watching,
Raising serious questions over health, age, and the law. And all eyes on India.
The most sophisticated government as far as restricting religious freedoms outside of China.
President Biden's trip for the G20 putting the spotlight on violence against Christians. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. After a landmark court victory, a praying coach steps down. In Washington, I'm John Jessup. Welcome to Faith Nation. Well, he took his fight defending the right to pray on the field all the way to the Supreme Court, but now Joe Kennedy is resigning his position as assistant football coach at Bremerton High School in Washington State. As we reported last night, Coach Kennedy returned to the football field after an 8-year court battle involving his post-game practice of praying on the 50-yard line. CBN News was there to capture his first night back on the gridiron, as well as the moment he once again knelt down and gave thanks to God. But this time, he was all alone. The coach told our David Brody the school district and the lawsuit have taken the joy out of coaching him, making him essentially feel like a stranger on the team.
As much as they have accepted me, still I feel like I'm kind of the outsider and still on, kind of like on enemy grounds, and I don't like that feeling.
And Coach Kennedy joins us now for more. Coach, welcome to you. We appreciate you making time for us. So, I remember traveling to Bremerton a few years ago, meeting you and interviewing you, and I doubt that many people would have seen this coming. Can you tell us more about why you felt like you needed to resign your position?
Yeah, not just because of being an outsider at the school and, all the petty things that went on there. I knew I was going to be in hostile territory. They were forced to take me back, and I thought it just would be the perfect time to actually resign on my own terms. We do have some health problems in our family down here in Florida, so that played a large part into our decision making. But, nobody's going to be ever happy with whatever decision I make. So I wanted to retire on my own terms instead of somebody else's.
I remember you telling me how much the students meant to you and how much they motivated you to get back on the field. So you were on the sidelines coaching this past Friday night. It was your first football game in 8 years. Can you tell us when you made the decision and why it was important for you to go back?
Right. We've been fighting for 8 years, and it's just been a never-ending marathon. We never thought we would actually get to Friday night, and that's what we were focused on. When we heard the news they have to reinstate me, it was all building up to that one night. I went through fall practice with these young men, and up to that game, I intended on sticking it out the whole season. My wife and I had our final supper, and I had a one-way ticket to Washington. When she came down and we talked about it and actually made it through that night, then we prayed about it, talked about it over the weekend, and we made some decisions early in the week.
Can I ask, just for clarification, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, were you the head coach prior to the 8-year battle, and then coming back, did you essentially take a demotion? Can you explain that?
Yes, I was the head coach for the junior varsity, so I got to run my own program, and it was awesome. I got to do everything to teach those young men to be better young men, to get them ready for varsity, and I felt very confident when they were stepping from junior varsity into the varsity arena. And when I came back to the school, they already had a head coach for the JV, and I didn't want to go in there and take his job away from him. He's worked this hard to get that position. So I took a second string to them, and I was all right with it.
Joe, can I ask you about community support, and not just community support, but how you've seen God's hand play in all of this?
Oh, I tell you, God's hand has been everywhere on this. From the beginning, how ridiculous is it that a guy could get fired, a high school football coach could get fired for taking a knee for 30 seconds after a football game? this has been going on in football from the beginning of football. People have been thanking God after a game. This wasn't something new, but for it to make this much news, headlines, and all the way to the Supreme Court, and God knew what he was doing for such a time as this. He made it where we got God back into the public schools, back into the public square, and we did it legally. And now we have more religious freedom now than we have had probably in the past 50 years, since I've been alive at least. And that is just amazing. And you can't tell me that God isn't part of that to bring him right back into a public school.
Coach, we only have a few seconds left. What's next for you?
Very good question. We've talked about ministry. We talked about continuing to fight for everybody's rights, and I will continue to fight for the religious freedoms of all Americans. And we'll just see where God puts us, and I ask everybody to keep praying for us and our family, and keep us in your thoughts and prayers.
I'm sure you certainly have a lot of people praying for you. We appreciate you making time for us, and we also wish you the best and understand your decision to prioritize your family. Coach Joe Kennedy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Well, from potential constitutional roadblocks to mental competency, the 2024 presidential campaign at times can feel like we're watching a bit of a sideshow. Still, polling suggests serious questions about President Biden's ability to govern, while some groups want to keep former President Trump off the ballot altogether. CBN's Caitlin Burke joins us with more details. Caitlin, Labor Day traditionally marks the unofficial start of the campaign season.
That's right, John. With summer ending, GOP candidates are hitting the trail in early voting states to meet voters face-to-face. But despite legal troubles, President Trump is still dominating the primary field.
Remember that nothing worth doing is ever easy. You'll have bad moments, and you gotta love what you're doing.
According to a recent Wall Street Journal poll, Trump leads the GOP field by more than 45 points, and he's the top choice for nearly 60% of Republican voters. But will he be on each state's ballot? A Washington-based watchdog group filed a lawsuit Wednesday seeking to bar the former president from the 2024 ballot in Colorado, citing a provision of the 14th Amendment. It states that an elected official is not eligible to assume public office if that person engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States.
And in my view, the attack on the Capitol that day was designed for a particular purpose at a particular moment, and that was to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power as is laid out in the Constitution.
Secretaries of State in New Hampshire, Maine, Arizona, and Michigan say they're preparing for challenges as well. Meanwhile, Wednesday in New Hampshire, former Vice President Mike Pence predicted the 2024 election will determine the future of the Conservative Party and called on fellow Republicans to reject the, quote, siren song of populism championed by Trump.
Should the new populism of the right seize and guide our party, the Republican Party we've long known will cease to exist, and the fate of American freedom would be in doubt.
On the Democrat side, President Joe Biden faces no real opposition, despite concerns about his age and performance. On CBS's Face the Nation, GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley said anyone running for elected office over the age of 50 should have to take a mental competency test.
We can't worry about Mitch McConnell being frozen at a podium. We can't have Joe Biden forget where he is. Our enemies are watching all of this, and every time they have an instance like that, America is less safe. The next major campaign event comes later this month at the second Republican debate. Trump previously said he will not be doing the debates, but it's unclear if that statement was referring to all of them or just the first one. John?
Despite the confusion, we will all be watching, Caitlin. So there's more news, though, coming out today out of Georgia in that election interference case. What do you know about that?
That's right. In a new development, Trump has informed the judge he may try and get the case moved to federal court. If successful, it could help him get the charges dropped by invoking immunity protections for federal officials. Now, if the trial happens in Georgia, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis wants to hold one massive trial in October for Trump and all other 18 co-defendants. The district attorney's office predicted the trial would last 4 months. But the judge on the case says it will likely go twice as long and is skeptical about whether the timeline is realistic at all. John?
All right, CBN's Caitlin Burke. Thank you for that report, Caitlin. Coming up, the new role of travel in the abortion debate. Welcome back. New research points to a rise in abortion in the United States, according to a New York Times analysis of data from the Guttmacher Institute. It is the latest view of legal abortions since the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. Some 511,000 legal abortions were estimated across 36 states and Washington, D.C. in the first 6 months of this year. That's compared to 465,000 abortions across all 50 states and the District of Columbia in the first 6 months of 2020. The study showed in nearly every state where it's legal, abortions rose. Well, Katie Daniel is the state policy director with Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, and she joins us now. Katie, thank you so much for being with us. You know, I think it's important to note, and it's hard not to notice, that this data comparing abortions in 2023 to the number of abortions in 2020, that was when we were in the middle of a global pandemic. What do you think accounts for this rise in abortions?
Well, I think the abortion industry wants to sell a message that overturning Roe didn't work, that the 25 states that have passed pro-life laws didn't work. But the reality is these are estimates. They don't know how many abortions occurred because our federal government doesn't collect that information. So they're making a lot of claims that are trying to dissuade pro-lifers from keeping up all the positive momentum we've had. But the reality is until we have comprehensive data collection, they don't know how many abortions have actually happened.
So, Katie, do you dispute the claims that they've increased, or are you just saying that you don't know?
I think that we need to wait to see more data, and they're making a lot of assumptions. They're taking numbers from a few facilities from states with outsized numbers. For many years, California has had the most abortions. So they're taking data from California and extrapolating it out. And importantly, there are now doctors who will send these pills in the mail without ever seeing a patient. So the number of prescriptions written is no longer correlated with the actual number of abortions happening. We need a lot more information before we just believe the Guttmacher Institute.
Katie, what about crossing state lines? The New York Times analysis suggests thousands of women are crossing into different states to obtain abortions where they are legal. Do you know if that's the case?
Certainly, with the data we've started to see from pro-life states that do still have legal abortion, we are seeing some women cross state lines. We're also seeing many women choose adoption, choose to parent. So I think the jury's still out before we draw serious conclusions from the New York Times or the Guttmacher Institute.
Finally, in just under a minute left, do you think we would have seen a greater increase in abortions if the Supreme Court had not overturned Roe?
I think it's certainly possible. The numbers were trending upward, unfortunately, in large part because the Biden administration has been pushing so hard on this pills by mail agenda, where they'll just send these drugs with no follow-up of what happens, leaving women on their own. So we saw the numbers trending upward. States are doing everything they can, and pro-lifers are doing everything they can to help women. But, you know, we'll keep watching these numbers and continue supporting moms and babies.
All right, Katie Daniel with Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, thank you so much for your time and your perspective tonight.
Thank you.
Well, a push to kick Christians out. Now, the world's most populous country is running rampant with religious persecution. Well, welcome back. Tonight, the president is heading overseas for the Group of 20 meeting in India this weekend. The G20 Leaders Summit in New Delhi comes as the United States and India strengthen ties and while tensions rise between the United States and China. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who skipped last year's G20 in Bali in the wake of the Ukrainian invasion, is not expected to attend. The two-day gathering kicks off Saturday. Well, with the eyes of the world on India, it puts a spotlight on the rising violence against Christians there in a countrywide attempt to eliminate all religions other than Hindu. Human rights groups accuse India's prime minister of supporting this extremist view, and several states have enacted laws to punish non-Hindus. CBN's George Thomas has this on-the-ground report.
At 16 years old, Paul was instructed to target Christians by the Rastriya Swayam Savak Sangh, or RSS, a radical Hindu paramilitary organization.
Since I was a Hindu and part of the RSS, I became a staunch follower of their Hindu principles, and because of that, killing Christians and pastors became my goal.
We've concealed Paul's identity for safety. He says the RSS singles out Christians because so many Hindus in India are abandoning their faith to follow Jesus Christ. One of the group's early founders referred to Christians as anti-national and hostile and should be treated as such. RSS members seen here often combine religious Hindu education with self-defense classes and exercises.
They told us Christianity doesn't belong to a country because they are converting people. Therefore, we have to attack pastors and demolish their churches so that our country will remain a Hindu country.
Hindus make up just under 80% of India's population. Muslims are at 14%. Christianity is India's third largest religion, with about 26 million followers, or about 2.3% of the population, and their numbers are steadily growing. Determined to stop the growth, Paul thought he had his chance when a pastor visited his hostel. Instead, the encounter changed his life when the pastor shared the gospel with him.
My heart was breaking when I heard that Jesus Christ's blood was sacrificed for me, that Jesus Christ loved me, and he gave his blood for my sins. I dedicated myself to Christ right there and then.
Paul now serves as a traveling pastor in remote areas of India's Karnataka state, often referred to as a graveyard of pastors because of the intense persecution Christians face here. His church is repeatedly attacked by RSS gangs. He's been put in prison for preaching, yet it hasn't stopped his ministry.
Even in jail, I felt God's love. Even though I received the beatings, I was rejoicing, and because of that, I am grateful to God.
India, with its 1.4 billion people, is the world's largest democracy. However, human rights and religious freedom advocates say democracy has been in retreat ever since the Hindu-led BJP government and its leader, Narendra Modi, took power in 2014.
It's really the most sophisticated government as far as restricting religious freedoms outside of China.
Dr. David Curry is a commission member of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. USCIRF has documented an unprecedented uptick in violence against Christians under Modi's rule. The majority of attacks carried out by RSS and other Hindu extremist groups with ties to the Prime Minister's political party. Modi is accused of fanning the flames of Hindutva, a radical ideology that teaches only Hindus are true Indians and that all other religions, especially Christians and Muslims, are foreigners who must be removed from society.
They have a goal to push Christianity out of India. They see India as the holy land of Hinduism, and they intend to force that to happen.
That includes passing laws that criminalize religious conversions, particularly targeting Christian and Muslim minorities. Last September, Karnataka became the 10th Indian state to pass these so-called anti-conversion laws, and with it carrying a 3 to 5 year prison term for anyone found guilty of illegally converting people to Christianity.
Ever since this anti-conversion law was passed, the authorities claim that we are forcibly converting people.
Joseph pastors in different cities and villages in Karnataka. We've taken similar precautions to protect his safety. He says RSS and other right-wing Hindu groups accuse him of converting Hindus by offering them money or other forms of bribes. He denies those charges.
When we started the ministry 35 years ago, we didn't have so many problems. Those days, we had religious freedom, but now we can't even talk, can't even give out a pamphlet, can't do anything. That's the situation that we find ourselves in today. Everyone has to run their churches with fear.
Like Pastor Paul, Joseph too has endured the wrath of Hindu radicals.
They've damaged my bicycles, set Bibles on fire, and burnt it. Come into our church during service and beat people up. The police have come to my house several times. I've been taken to the police station and repeatedly accused of forcing people to convert. They never have any evidence.
12 of India's 28 states, most of them ruled by Modi's BJP party, now have laws regulating religious conversions. These states have also witnessed a surge in mob violence against Indian Christians.
It is amazing how Christians are standing firm in their faith.
Don Schenk heads up an organization that's been sharing the gospel primarily through Christian radio broadcasts in India since 1978. His group has documented cases where Hindu extremists have discriminated against new Christian converts. Authorities, especially at the village level, do little to nothing to protect the vulnerable believers.
It is amazing the number of people who are being banned from going to the village well, not allowed to purchase foods at the market, being chased out, from being ostracized from family and community, to actually being beaten, being killed, having their property destroyed.
Although the Constitution gives Christians the right to preach, Schenk says the church in India must still be careful.
Pray for the believers to stand firm in their faith, and pray for those who are doing the persecution, that their hearts will be changed, because we have seen that happen. A village priest threatened to smash a radio that somebody was using for outreach, but as he made those threats, he also came close and listened to the radio, and he himself embraced Jesus Christ as his Savior.
George Thomas, CBN News, Karnataka, India.
All right, thank you, George. Well, a traffic stop turned into an act of kindness. The details when we come back next on Faith Nation. Well, it is an example where actions speak louder than words, and in this case, louder than a speeding ticket. After getting pulled over by a sheriff's deputy, a Kansas driver pulled over and admitted he was having a rough day. The deputy warned the driver to slow down, but offered something else. He gave the driver some encouragement in the form of a hug.
I need a hug. Can
sure.
I have a hug, please?
Yeah.
I don't mean to bother you, but I'm sorry.
No, you're good, man.
I promise you, it's going to get better.
The department says being compassionate is just another way to serve the community. And what a great way to get out of a ticket as well. I'm glad that he got the comfort that he needed. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.